Welcome to the Human Resource. How many of you are using agreements for repayment of some sort? And I'm talking about, let's talk about relocation. If we as the employer relocate you, we need you to stay for 2 years so that we can recoup the relocation expenses. If I send you to this class and you take, educational courses, I'm going to put you on an educational reimbursement agreement, and you're going to pay me back the cost of these classes if you don't stay with me for a period of time. Here's a big one. If we pay for your visa and attorney's fees, you have to stay with us for a period of a couple of years to help me, so I can get the benefit of my investment. How many of you are actually using those agreements? And this is very important because I'm going to really stress on this show today that this is a conversation that we're going to have that is going to require, if you are using these agreements in any shape or form, and they could be used for training repayment, educational repayment, quit fees. I used an outside recruiter, so I'm going to have you sign this agreement saying if you leave and I paid 20% of your salary, you're going to pay me a percentage of that back. Damage clauses. If I'm going to let you drive this brand new CDL size truck, but if you wreck it or damage it, I'm going to withhold funds. You're going to pay me back, or you have to stay for a period of time until I can recoup these costs. How about sign-on bonuses? Anything where the employee has to repay the employer upon voluntary or involuntary separation of the employment. And again, I've been in human resources for decades, and I have seen a number of these agreements or contracts used for all those reasons. And, outside of servitude, and we never practice servitude, ever, ever, ever. We're not going to tell somebody they can't leave employment with us, no matter what we do as employers to help them or to get them as a part of our team. We're not going to lock them in and not permit them to leave. But at the same time, we want to make sure that when we're investing in them, we're getting something. And if they leave early, well, then at least pay us back for what we're not going to benefit from. Makes sense? Well, these documents need to be legal documents. And if you didn't talk to your labor law attorney in creating that, if you don't have legal advice putting those together, this is the time, and I'm telling you right now, this is November 14th of 2024 as I'm taping this show. I'm telling you need to talk to your labor law attorney tomorrow. This is a topic that General Counsel for the National Labor Relations Board has picked to start voicing her opinions on. And she even put a time frame on it, guys. So if you have not heard about her decision for stay or pay provisions, please listen carefully. And she's claiming that it's now unlawful to have these if they're ill-written. And that's why I'm saying, if you have them, I want you to get to your labor law attorney tomorrow. Not your tax attorney, not your business attorney, your labor law attorney. And if you don't have one, you get a hold of me, call the station here, or reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn. You can find me. And I'll one of the guys that I work with, we will help you with this. In her recent paper, she explains that employers write these in such a way that employees don't feel like they have any choice but to sign them. And that it's too much tied to, contingent to their employment. And they can be too restricting. I'll agree with that. So here's some things I want you to look at and here's where you're going to find your flags. Does your agreement allow employees to have the option to agree or decline with the provision in any way without facing financial penalties or adverse employment consequences? So if an employee is required to go to a training, if you're expecting them and you say, look, I'm asking you to do this, you need to do this, does the employee have the ability to say, well, I'm not going to pay for it without the fear of losing their job? You see, there are things that are our responsibility that we don't have the right to ask the employee to participate with. And this is where she's identifying, saying, look, we may be using these a little too often, and we may be trying to restrict and collect our investment back when we really have no right as employers. The second one was, does it specify a reasonable and upfront repayment amount? And what she means by this is the repayment amount should not exceed the employer's actual cost of the benefit conferred, and the debt must be clearly stated upfront in the employment contract. You can't put a percentage of or an interest rate on it, and you've got to prove where you came up with that amount. The agreements that I have used in the past have specifically said, this is the amount of the class, this is how the repayment's going to be in terms of a prorated amount over time. And if they want to pay, if they want to leave, this is how the payment will come back to the company. This only makes sense. I mean, if you think about it, this does make sense. We're not in the business to make money off of our employees. How about a reasonable stay period? What is reasonable? The duration of the required employment should not be based on factors like the cost and value of the benefit, whether the repayment decreases over time, and the employee's income level. So, yes, if you're an HVAC organization and you're investing $10,000 in getting an individual through the entire apprentice program or the entire training program, that's a big investment. But will that individual make enough money to be able to pay that back if by some chance they do leave? You have to take that into consideration. You also have to understand that you got a benefit for the period that they were there. So again, are you using prorated amounts for that payback? And are you asking somebody to stay literally for 3 or 5 years? Nobody stays at an employer for 3 or 5 years anymore, unless there are a couple industries and a couple of disciplines that still we see some longevity at. But for the most part, our workforce is a different workforce. So are you using reasonable payback periods? How about, does it exclude repayment if the employee is terminated without cause? The provision must clearly state that no repayment is required if the employee is terminated without cause. That one's going to be a hard one to swallow. And the bottom line is, the General Counsel wants to force employers to pay employees for lost job opportunities that they may have pursued or gone after, but couldn't because they were on one of these agreements. She's specifically saying, if employees can demonstrate that there was a vacancy available for a job with a better compensation package, they have the right to get out of this agreement without any penalty. They were qualified for a job and they didn't go because they were tied down, or that they were discouraged from applying for or accepting a job because of the stay or pay provision. Now, you got to remember where we're at right now. We're working with an NLRB and a General Counsel that is not in favor of the employer and is very, very much in favor of the employee. And she's focusing on non-union environments. So don't think that this is only for unionized employers. It's not. So again, I have to go back and challenge you. How many of you are actually using any kind of an agreement or contract like this? Go back, because even if it was written 5 or 6 years ago and the person has stayed all this time, make sure that they still aren't under one of these agreements. And go back and revise what you do have with your labor law attorney, so that somebody doesn't just grab a template and try to apply it here in 6 months, 9 months, a year. Because what she is saying in this particular paper is that you have a deadline of getting all this changed by December 6th of 2024. Now, whether this sits, whether this stays, only you and your labor law attorney can discuss it from here on out. But that's where I'm going to recommend sending you. And don't forget, we want your questions. We want your feedback. So let us know what you think of the show. We really appreciate everybody listening to The Human Resource.